The trap snapped shut with a sound like bone breaking. Ada had stopped screaming long before the sun reached its highest point. Her leg was caught deep in the iron jaws, blood darkening the sand beneath her, drying too fast in the heat. The desert did not rush death. It let it linger. Every breath scraped her chest raw. Every minute stretched longer than the last. She had already decided how this would end. So when the shadow fell across her, tall, unfamiliar, carrying the shape of a man, she did not cry out. She tightened her grip on the small knife pressed against her own skin and lifted her eyes slowly, measuring him the way one measures the edge of a cliff. He was white, worn, still. "Finish it, white man," she said, her voice steady despite the pain. "Or I will. I won't be dragged away. Not alive." The words hung between them, sharp as the iron teeth in her leg. Thomas Calder did not answer. He stood there longer than he should have, the desert wind tugging at his coat, the smell of blood and rust filling his lungs. He had seen death before, plenty of it. But this was different. This was a woman who had already made peace with dying and was daring him to prove what kind of man he was. Slowly, deliberately, Thomas set his rifle down in the dust. Then he knelt beside the trap. Before we continue the story, take a moment to comment below and tell me where you're watching from and why Wild West love stories speak to you. Your thoughts help this tale reach the folks who truly feel its heartbeat. The land around them lay bare and unforgiving, a stretch of red stone and scrub caught in the folds of the Chiricahua Mountains. It was the kind of country that did not belong to anyone for long. Wind carved the rock, sun bleached bone white. Water hid itself in cracks and vanished without warning. People passed through, survived if they could, and left little behind but footprints. The desert was quick to erase. It was late spring, the season when the days grew cruel and the nights offered only thin mercy. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried, its shadow circling once before drifting away. Nothing else moved. Ada leaned back against the stone, her breath shallow but controlled. Pain lived in her leg now, deep and constant, but she refused to let it show on her face. Her dark hair was bound low at her neck, streaked with dust and sweat. Lines of strain marked her cheeks, not from age, but from a life that had taught her to endure without complaint. Her eyes, sharp and unblinking, never left the man kneeling near her. She was a widow of the Chiricahua, though nothing about her posture suggested grief still ruled her. Grief had done its work years ago and moved on, leaving behind something harder. Ata had spent her days tending wounds, setting bones, mixing bitter herbs for fever and pain. She had learned how quickly life could slip away and how stubbornly it sometimes clung on. She had buried her husband with her own hands. Since then, she had lived not for herself, but because others depended on her to keep breathing. Thomas Calder did not look like a man who belonged anywhere either. At 39, his body still carried strength, but it was the kind worn down by miles rather than battle. His clothes were patched and sun-faded, his boots split at the seams. A beard shadowed his jaw, streaked with early gray he did not bother to hide. There was a tired caution in the way he moved, as though the world had already taught him its worst lessons, and he expected no favors from it. He had once owned land, once known the sound of a door closing behind him at night, the warmth of a child asleep under the same roof. That life felt like it belonged to another man now. Since losing it, Thomas had learned to travel light. No town ties, no promises, no names spoken too often. He hunted when he had to, worked when it suited him, and slept where the land allowed. Staying was dangerous. Staying meant remembering. Between them lay the trap. Its iron jaws were old, pitted with rust and dried blood that did not belong to Ata. The chain had been hammered into a rock too heavy for any animal to drag away. Thomas recognized it at once. This was not meant for coyotes or bears. It was meant for people, for women who wandered too far from their own. That knowledge settled in his gut like a stone. He glanced once at the narrow canyon walls, at the faint disturbances in the sand that told him someone had been here not long ago. Whoever had set the trap had not gone far. Whoever they were, they would come back. Thomas looked again at Ata. She did not ask him for help. She did not lower the knife. She waited. And in that silence, with the heat pressing down and danger already moving somewhere beyond sight, Thomas Calder felt the first pull of something he had spent years avoiding, the weight of being needed and the case that would come with it. Thomas shifted closer, slow enough that even the wind seemed to wait with him. He kept his hands where Ata could see them, empty and open, palms marked with old scars and newer calluses. The knife in her grip did not waver. Its edge caught the sun each time she breathed. "If you're here to talk," she said, her voice low, controlled. "Don't, I won't." "No," Thomas answered. It was the first word he'd spoken since she'd threatened him, and it came out rough, like it hadn't been used much lately. Her eyes narrowed, not in fear but calculation. She watched the way he moved, the way he knelt without crowding her, the way his gaze flicked once to the canyon mouth and back again. She had seen men before, hunters, traders, soldiers, and had learned how to read the spaces between their actions. This one carried himself like someone who expected trouble and had already decided not to run from it. "You touch that trap," she warned, "and I'll cut myself free." "You won't," Thomas said quietly. That earned him a sharp look. "You don't know me." "I know pain," Aditi replied, "and I know blood loss. You won't make it 10 steps." Silence stretched between them again. A hawk cried overhead, closer now, as if curious how this would end. Ata exhaled through her nose. "Then do it," she said, "or leave." Thomas studied the trap. The iron teeth clamped deep into her leg, the skin swollen and angry around the metal. He'd opened traps before, but never one set this deliberately, chained down like a promise someone intended to keep. He reached for the mechanism, then stopped, glancing back at her. "It's going to hurt," he said. Her mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It already does." He nodded once. No more words. He braced his boot against the rock, set his grip, and worked the rusted jaws apart inch by inch. The metal screamed in protest. Ata bit down hard on a strip of leather she tore from her own pouch, her breath hissing between her teeth. She did not cry out. When the trap finally released, Thomas caught her leg before it could fall back against the stone. Blood welled fast and dark. He pressed his bandana tight around the wound, cinching it until her fingers dug into his sleeve. "Don't let go," she ordered. "I won't," he said, and meant it for the first time. Her eyes flicked away from his face, just for a moment, toward the canyon, toward the world that had put her here. "They'll come back," she said. "I know." "You should go," she added. "Now." Thomas shook his head. "Can't." That answer surprised her. She looked at him again, really looked this time. "We..." He hesitated, the truth pressing up against his ribs. "Because I already left once," he said. "Didn't end well." That was all he offered. It was enough. Ata studied him for the long moment, then nodded toward the narrow trail leading out of the canyon. "There's shelter. Not far, if you can carry me." Thomas slid an arm beneath her shoulders without asking. She stiffened, then allowed it, her weight settling against him like a decision already made as he lifted her. The knife finally slipped from her hand and fell into the dust. Neither of them bent to pick it up. The shelter Ata led him to was nothing more than a shallow rock overhang tucked into the foothills, half hidden by scrub and shadow. It was the kind of place people passed without seeing, the kind the land offered only to those who already knew where to look. A thin trickle of water seeped from a crack in the stone, just enough to cup in 2 hands if one was patient. Thomas lowered her carefully onto a bed of dry grass and folded his coat beneath her head. Only then did he allow himself to breathe. The wound was worse than he'd let on. The trap had crushed muscle deep, close to the bone. Infection would come quickly in this heat. He cleaned it as best he could, using water sparingly, his movements steady and deliberate. Ata watched him the whole time, not flinching, not turning away. "You've done this before," she said. "Enough," he replied. "On people." He hesitated. "Yes." She accepted that without judgment. People in her world did not ask questions they weren't prepared to live with the answers to. As the sun slipped west, the heat eased just enough to make breathing less of a struggle. Thomas built a small fire, keeping the smoke low. He rationed water. He checked the canyon mouth again and again, reading the ground the way others read words on a page. Someone had passed nearby recently, maybe more than one someone. The knowledge stayed with him. heavy and constant. That night, fever came. Ada's skin burned beneath his hands, her breaths uneven. She muttered in her sleep, words he did not understand, names spoken with both tenderness and fury. Once, her fingers clutched his sleeve with sudden strength, as if afraid the world might slip away if she let go. Thomas stayed awake until dawn. He had learned long ago that sleep made a man careless, and carelessness had cost him everything once already. By the second day, she was lucid again, though pale and drained. He offered her water, holding it while she drank. When she finished, she pushed the cup back toward him. "You didn't leave," she said. "No." "You could have." "Yes." She studied his face, the lines carved by sun and regret. "Why didn't you?" Thomas looked past her toward the open land beyond the shelter. "Didn't seem right," he said. It was the only answer he trusted himself to give. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. He gathered what food he could, moving fast and light, never gone long. She tended her own wound when she was able, grinding herbs she'd carried in her pouch, showing him how to lay them just so. When he followed her instructions, she nodded once, approving. When he didn't, she corrected him without softness. "You don't rush healing," she said. "You let it happen." Thomas smiled faintly at that. "Wish someone had told me earlier." At night, they spoke little. The fire burned low. The stars stretched wide and indifferent overhead. Yet in the silence, something shifted. The tension between them eased, replaced by a fragile understanding neither of them named. Ata noticed things. She noticed how Thomas never sat with his back fully turned to the open land, how he flinched not at loud sounds, but at quiet ones that came too suddenly, how he spoke to his horse in a low voice, as if apologizing for things no one else could hear. Thomas noticed things too. He noticed the scar along Ato's forearm, old and clean, the mark of a blade wielded in defense, not fear. He noticed how she woke before the sun, even when pain made it hard, how she insisted on doing small tasks herself the moment she could stand. He noticed the absence she carried with her, the space beside her that no one else occupied. On the fourth day, she stood without support. Her legs shook, but she stayed upright, jaw set. Thomas hovered close, hands ready but not touching. When she swayed, she steadied herself against the stone and breathed through it. "I won't lie down again," she said. "Not unless I choose to." "I won't make you," he answered. That earned him a look, measured, almost curious. "You don't make people do much." "I used to," he said before he could stop himself. She waited, giving him space to either continue or retreat. He chose retreat. That evening, as the light faded, Ata spoke again. "The trap," she said, "it wasn't meant for animals." "I know. They'll come back." "I know. And when they do," she added quietly, "they won't stop at one." Thomas met her gaze. "I'm not planning on being gone." That was the first promise he'd made in years, though he did not yet understand the shape it would take. When the Chiricahua finally found them, it was just after sunrise. Thomas heard them before he saw them. Footsteps placed with care, the faint shift of air that came from many bodies moving as one. He stepped away from Ata and raised his hands, slow and open. Ata spoke first, her voice calm, clear. Faces emerged from the rocks, familiar and guarded. A murmur passed among them when they saw her leg, the bandage, the iron trap lying broken nearby. Questions followed, sharp and necessary. Thomas answered only when spoken to, never embellishing, never defending. He did not say he'd saved her. He said only what he'd done. The elders listened. When they spoke, it was not in anger. It was in assessment. Ada stood beside Thomas, unsteady but proud. She did not reach for him, but she did not step away either. "You stayed," one of the elders said to him. "Yes." "You knew the risk." "Yes." A long pause followed. The land itself seemed to wait. "Then for now," the elder said at last, "you remain." It was not acceptance, it was not rejection, it was a beginning. As they led Ada home, Thomas walked with them, aware that the ground beneath his feet had shifted. He had crossed an invisible line, one he could not step back over without consequence. Behind them, the broken trap lay half buried in the dust, iron jaws gaping open. It would not be the last reminder that danger had found its way into their lives. But for the first time in a long while, Thomas Calder did not feel alone facing it. Life in the rancheria resumed its quiet patterns, but something had shifted beneath the surface. The air carried a tension that did not belong to the season alone. It settled in the pauses between conversations, in the way the children were kept closer, in how the men checked the hills more often than before. Thomas felt it every morning when he stepped outside the wickiup allotted to him. He had been given a place near Atta's family, not inside her space, but close enough that the boundary was clear and watched. He accepted it without comment. Trust, he understood now, was not given all at once. It was measured out day by day. He worked where he was told. He hauled water from the seep at dawn, repaired a cracked drying rack, helped the older men reinforce the brush screens that hid the outer paths. He spoke little, listened much. The elders observed him without warmth or hostility, weighing his presence against the cost of it. Atta returned to her duties as soon as her leg allowed. She moved carefully at first, favoring the injured limb, but her hands were steady, her eyes sharp. She tended fevers, mixed poultices, soothed frightened children with a voice that carried calm, even when the words themselves were spare. Thomas watched her work and understood why her absence would have left a wound in this place no one else could easily fill. They did not speak of what lay between them. Not yet. The broken trap had been carried back and set near the council fire, its iron jaws pried open and left exposed. It was not a warning to outsiders. It was a reminder to themselves. On the 7th morning after their return, the first sign came. A boy, sent to check the lower water source, returned breathless, his eyes wide. He spoke quickly, words tumbling over one another, until an elder raised a hand and made him slow down. Tracks, not Apache, heavy boots, more than one, leading toward the canyon where Atta had been found. The council gathered at once. Thomas stood at the edge of the circle, aware that every word spoken carried weight. He did not interrupt. He did not offer plans. He waited. "They are testing us," one of the men said, "seeing who stays." "They know about the woman of Haina," another added, his gaze flicking briefly toward Atta. "They always know." Silence followed that. No one needed to say the rest aloud. Chogan spoke at last, his voice low but firm. "We do not wait for them to come to us." The decision was made quickly after that. Not to fight, not yet, but to move part of the people, not all. Those who could travel easily would go first, drawing attention away from the valley. Others would remain behind to guard what could not be abandoned so easily. Eyes turned inevitably to Atta, and then, just as inevitably, to Thomas. "This place has been safe because it changes," Chogan said, not accusing, not defending. "Now it has been seen." Thomas felt the familiar tightening in his chest. He knew that feeling. It was the sound of a door closing somewhere in the past. Later that day, he and Atta walked together toward the lower water source, accompanied by 2 younger men who kept their distance but never lost sight of them. The path wound between rock and scrub, narrow enough that sound carried. Thomas read the ground as they went, his gaze flicking from stone to shadow. He stopped suddenly, raising a hand. Atta froze at once. There, half hidden beneath loose sand, was another trap, newer, the chain freshly hammered into stone. "They're close," Thomas said. The wind shifted. A sound carried from beyond the bend in the path, voices not raised, confident. There was no time to retreat quietly. The men came into view without hurry, 3 of them, broad-shouldered, sunburned, armed, but not expecting resistance. Their eyes went first to Atta, then to Thomas. One of them smiled. "Well," he drawled in accented Spanish, "looks like we found what we lost." Thomas stepped forward before Atta could speak. He did not raise his rifle. He did not lower his gaze. "You're in the wrong place," he said. The man laughed softly. "Don't think so." The moment stretched thin as a blade. Then Atta moved. She did not run. She did not scream. She stepped sideways, her voice sharp and sudden, calling out in Apache. The younger men vanished into the brush at once, exactly as planned. Thomas acted at the same instant, swinging his rifle up, not to fire but to strike. The butt caught one man across the shoulder, sending him stumbling. Another reached for his weapon, But Thomas was already moving, driving him back with force and noise, enough to make pursuit risky. Ada grabbed Thomas's sleeve. Now, they did not win. They did not need to. They broke away together, vanishing into the folds of the land Atta knew better than any map. The men shouted, fired once, blindly, but the sound was swallowed by stone and distance. When the echoes died, Thomas and Atta were already gone. They returned to the rancheria with proof. The new trap, the tracks, the certainty that the danger was no longer theoretical. This time there was no debate. That night, Chogan spoke again. By morning, he said, half of us will be gone. Atta sat very still as the words settled. Thomas felt the ground tilt beneath him. Later in the quiet between fires, Thomas packed his few belongings. He worked methodically, hands steady, as if the decision had already been made. Atta watched from a distance before finally approaching. You're leaving, she said. Yes. Because of them? Because of me, he answered. She frowned. That makes no sense. It does, he said quietly. To me. She studied him, searching for something he was not offering. You think if you go, they won't come back? I think if I stay, he replied, they'll keep looking. Her jaw tightened. And what about what I want? The question hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Thomas looked away. That's why I'm not asking you to say it. Silence fell, heavy with all the words neither of them had spoken since the day of the trap. Atta spoke first. I spent years living because others needed me to, she said. I learned to be careful, to be useful, to survive. He nodded. He understood that kind of life too well. And now, she continued, you want to decide for me again? His head snapped up. No. That's what you're doing. The truth of it landed hard. Before he could respond, Chogan approached, his presence calm but unyielding. The choice is not only yours, the elder said to Thomas, and it is not only hers. Thomas bowed his head slightly. I won't bring harm to your people. Chogan studied him for a long moment. Harm is already here, he said. Running does not always outrun it. With that, Turihime, that he turned away. As the fires burned low and the rancheria prepared for dawn, Thomas lay awake, staring into the dark. He could hear Atta breathing somewhere beyond the thin wall of hide. The land outside was quiet, but not at rest. By morning, people would leave, others would stay. And one way or another, a line would be crossed that could not be uncrossed. The trap had been broken, the hunt had not. Dawn came without ceremony. No drums, no farewells, spoken too loudly. The people who were leaving moved with the practiced efficiency of those who had done this before, breaking down shelters, bundling what mattered, leaving the rest to the land. Children were kept close. The elders watched everything, saying little, remembering much. Thomas stood apart, his pack set at his feet. He had chosen his place deliberately, far enough from Atta that no one would mistake his presence for pressure, close enough that she would know he had not vanished in the night. He had learned the hard way that leaving quietly was easier than staying honestly. Atta emerged from her family's wickiup just as the sun cleared the ridge. She walked without assistance now, though her limp had not fully faded. Her hair was braided tightly, her shoulders squared. She looked like a woman prepared to travel far, or not at all. Their eyes met across the thinning camp. Neither smiled. They did not speak at first. Words, Thomas had learned, were dangerous things in moments like this. They could tip a balance that might never right itself again. Around them, the rancheria shifted. Half of the people were already on the move, following a narrow trail that would scatter and vanish by noon. Those remaining watched them go, knowing that separation was not abandonment, only another form of survival. Atta crossed the space between herself and Thomas at last. You packed early, she said. Habit, he replied. She nodded as if that answered more than he'd said. They stood there, the sounds of departure rising and falling around them. A child cried somewhere. A horse snorted and stamped. The wind carried the scent of dust and sage. You were ready to leave before Chogan spoke, Atta said quietly. Thomas did not deny it. I was ready to leave the day I found you. Her gaze sharpened. Then why didn't you? He hesitated. The truth was not simple, and he was tired of simplifying the things that mattered. Because staying stopped being about me, he said, and started being about what it might cost you. Ada looked past him toward the trail the others were taking. Cost, she repeated. That word follows you. It follows anyone who's lost something, he answered. She studied his face, the lines time and regret had carved there. You think leaving protects me? I know it protects the people here, he said. Maybe you too. And if it doesn't, she asked. He swallowed. Then I'll be gone before I can make it worse. That finally made her angry. You think I don't understand danger? She said, her voice low but sharp. You think I haven't lived with it since the day my husband died? Thomas flinched, not at her words, but at the truth in them. I'm not afraid of dying, Atta continued. I've been close enough to it to know what it feels like. I'm afraid of disappearing without ever choosing my own life. The words struck something deep and brittle in him. I chose once, Thomas said quietly. I chose to leave. I told myself it was for the right reasons. And I came back to Graves. Silence fell between them again, heavy and absolute. Ata's anger faded into something steadier. Then you know, she said. You know what it costs to let fear decide for you. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he did not look away. I won't ask you to stay, he said. I won't ask you to risk anything for me. That's the problem, she replied. You think asking is the same as taking. Before he could answer, Chogan approached, his steps unhurried. The people who go are nearly gone, the elder said. Those who remain will not move again soon. Thomas inclined his head. I understand. Chogan's gaze shifted to Atta. So do you. She met his eyes without hesitation. Yes. The elder studied them both, reading the space between their words as easily as tracks in dust. What happens next will not be easy, he said. Those who stay will be watched, tested. I know, Atta said. Chogan nodded once, then choose with open eyes. He left them then, his role finished. The camp was quieter now. The trail lay empty. Thomas picked up his pack. Atta watched the movement, her face unreadable. He slung it over his shoulder and took one step away, then stopped. I won't stay if you don't want me here, he said, but I won't pretend I don't want to be. The words cost him more than he'd expected. They left him exposed in a way no blade ever had. Atta drew a slow breath. I stayed alive all these years because people needed me, she said, because it was easier than wanting something for myself. She stepped closer. I won't leave, she said, not today. Not like this. Thomas searched her face, afraid to believe what he heard. Because of me? Because of me, she corrected. You are part of it, not all of it. The distinction mattered. He lowered his pack to the ground. No celebration followed. No cheers. Only the quiet acknowledgement of a choice made and accepted. As the sun climbed higher, those who remained began rebuilding what had been taken down. Fires were lit again. The work resumed. Thomas and Atta stood side by side, watching the land settle around them. The danger had not passed, but neither had the moment. And for the first time in many years, Thomas Calder did not feel like he was standing at the edge of his life, looking in from the outside. He felt unmistakably that he had stepped back into it. The valley did not change overnight. The same wind moved through the grass. The same redstone caught the light at dawn and held it long after the sun slipped away. Danger did not pack up and leave simply because a choice had been made. It lingered at the edges, patient and watchful. But something fundamental had shifted. Thomas stayed, not as a guest waiting to be sent on his way, and not as a man pretending he could disappear again if things grew difficult. He stayed because he had chosen to, and because he had been chosen in return. The difference settled into him slowly, like warmth returning to a limb long thought numb. Work filled the days, real work, the kind that asked for effort but gave something back in return. Thomas helped reinforce paths that could be abandoned quickly if needed, learn which routes led nowhere, and which might save lives in the dark. He listened when the elder spoke. He spoke when asked, and no more. As Atta walked beside him through it all. Her leg healed, leaving a pale scar that neither of them pretended was small. She returned fully to her role as a healer, but something in her had loosened. She laughed once unexpectedly when a child corrected her grip on a basket strap. The sound caught Thomas off guard. It was not loud. It was real. They did not rush what grew between them. At night, they shared the same fire, sitting close enough that the space between them felt intentional rather than uncertain. Sometimes they spoke of practical things, water levels, travel signs, weather. Sometimes they said nothing at all. Silence no longer felt like a warning, it felt earned. One evening, Thomas brought the broken trap back to the edge of the camp. He did not announce it. He did not make a show of it. He dug a shallow pit and set the iron jaws inside, pressing them down into the earth until they vanished beneath stone and dirt. When he finished, he stood for a long moment, breathing in the cool air. Ata joined him without a word. "It doesn't mean they're gone, eh? She said. "I know," he replied, "but it means they don't own this place." She added. He nodded. "Not today." The elders took notice quietly. No ceremony followed. None was needed. Weeks passed. The people who had left sent word through travelers that they had reached safer ground. The valley remained watchful, but whole. Children resumed their games. Fires burned longer into the evening. One morning, as the sun climbed over the ridge, Ata stood at the center of a new wiki-up frame, its supports lashed but not yet covered. She held a strip of hide in her hands, considering where it should go. Thomas approached and waited. "This one faces east," she said. "Good light," he answered. She looked at him then, not searching, not guarded. "It will need repair before winter." "I can do that." "I know." They worked side by side, fitting pieces into place, adjusting when something did not quite align. When the structure stood finished, it was not grand. It did not promise safety from everything the world could still bring. It promised shelter. That night they sat inside it together, the fire low, the air cool. Thomas reached for her hand without asking. Ata let him take it. "I won't leave," he said quietly, not as a vow spoken to the sky, but as a truth offered to her alone. She did not ask him to swear it again. Outside, the land lay open and unsoftened. The paths beyond the valley still carried risk. The future held no guarantees. But inside the wiki-up, with her hand warm in his and the fire steady between them, Thomas Calder understood something he had not allowed himself to believe in years. This was not redemption. It was not forgiveness. It was two people, battered but standing, choosing to build something worth defending. Not because it was safe, but because it was theirs. And for now, that was enough. The story of Thomas Calder and Ata in the unforgiving Chiricahua Desert unveils a timeless life lesson. True strength is found in choosing to stay and build, even when fear and past losses urge you to flee. Thomas, haunted by a life left in graves, could have walked away from Ata's pain, but her fierce resolve to define her own end stirred something deeper in him. Their bond, forged through shared survival and mutual respect, teaches us that love and trust are not grand gestures, but quiet, deliberate choices made day after day. Ata's refusal to let fear dictate her life, and Thomas's decision to stand by her despite the looming threat of danger, remind us that living fully means embracing vulnerability, not running from it. This resonates profoundly in our own lives, where the temptation to avoid risk can keep us from meaningful connections. By choosing to stay, they built a life not free of danger, but rich with purpose, a testament to the courage it takes to claim your own path and defend what matters. This story challenges us to ask, when have we chosen to stay, and what did it cost us to do so? If this tale moved you, share your story in the comments. What moments have you faced where staying was harder than leaving? Your voices keep these stories alive, weaving a tapestry of human resilience. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell to join our journey through more soul-stirring Wild West tales. Let's keep the fire burning together for stories that remind us what it means to truly live.